Well, welcome everyone to this month's edition of What's Your Plan? My name is Steve Lorberbaum. I'm the owner of Assisting Hands Home Care, and Patricia DeBroof helps organize this for us. And what we try to do each month is bring an industry expert in to talk about something that is useful for folks either with disabilities or seniors who are choosing to age in place, or even seniors just may want information about added resources. Same thing with folks with disabilities. So Assisting Hands, we're a private duty home care company, which basically means we put aids in people's homes to help them wherever they are. So it could be, we serve people that are in hotels recovering from surgeries, to people who are living in assisted living, in rehabs and hospitals, in their private residences, all with the goal towards making their lives easier. Our oldest client thus far has been 107, and our youngest is a 6-year-old that we are helping the family support because both parents are work high-powered jobs. They have a daughter with disabilities, and they just need somebody to help out a few days a week to give them a break so they can go into their offices rather than working from home. So we do a variety of things all over Montgomery County, PG County, and Fairfax County, Virginia. But it's not about us. Today, it's about Shawn Ullman and Quality Trust. And so we're really delighted that she could join us and tell us more about what Quality Trust does and how they can help folks with disabilities. So Shawn, give us a little intro on you and let's go.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Hi, everyone. I'm Shawn Ullman, and I am the sort of brand new CEO at Quality Trust for Individuals with Disabilities. I am an attorney by training, and I started my career in special education advocacy. I represented families and created sort of a special education advocacy program for legal services attorneys in Ohio for a couple of years right out of school. Before coming back to DC, I went to law school in DC. And in DC, I worked for the Protection and Advocacy Program. So at the Protection and Advocacy Program, I represented people with developmental disabilities, both kids and adults. I joined Quality Trust in March of this year after being with the ARC for 6 years. At the ARC, I started by running their special education advocacy program for their chapters across the country, and then took on the individual family support program, which focuses on future planning and helping families think about what will happen when they're no longer able to provide support for their loved ones with disabilities, which I know is an issue that's really important to the folks that you guys support and your audience. So that's about me. Quality Trust is an advocacy organization. They were actually founded in 2001 as a result of litigation against the District of Columbia government. And the government was struggling to provide services and supports to people with developmental disabilities in the community after our institution called Forest Haven closed. And so our mission is to be a catalyst for change for people with developmental disabilities. And our vision for people is that they're respected and belong and really able to contribute and be valued by their communities and be active participants in their communities. We work towards that mission by partnering with people and their families. And one of our core beliefs is that people with disabilities should control all aspects of their lives, that their support should take a lifespan approach and really think about what they'll need throughout their whole entire lives. And that families are really critical advocacy partners in ensuring those services are available to people.
Okay, so let me ask you this. How is it you partner with people? Since you're mostly an advocacy organization, let's say I have a daughter with disabilities and I come to you all. How do I get to you, and what is it you would help me and my wife and daughter do?
Well, as you might imagine, it depends on your situation. We have two sort of different, well, we have several different ways we might do that depending on what your personal situation is. So we have a legal team, and our legal team focuses on providing advocacy for individuals around issues of self-determination, alternatives to guardianship, if there are concerns about people's rights being violated, or if they're not getting the services and supports that they need. And it's something that our legal team can assist with in some ways. We do have some limits on what our legal team can do. So we have a legal team that can provide legal services. We also have a team called Monitoring and Advocacy. And one thing that team does is if a family has some concerns about the services and supports that their loved one is getting, that team tends to specifically support people in DC, not in Maryland or Virginia. Our other teams might be able to support families in both Maryland and Virginia, but our monitoring and advocacy team tends to focus on people living in the District of Columbia, receiving services from the DC Developmental Disabilities Administration. And they go and sort of check out the situation. They go to people's homes, they look at their records, they talk to staff and family members and the person and figure out what's going on and if something needs to be fixed. And then they advocate for whatever the services and supports are or a solution to the challenge that is brought to their attention. In addition to sort of those direct things, we also do trainings for family members and try to help connect family with resources in the community, depending on what their issue is.
Gotcha. So let's say, we'll oftentimes have families come to us. One of the things that we do at Assisting Hands is provide sort of advice and resources. So if I had a family come to us and said, you know what, I don't even know how to get services for my adult daughter through the DDA. Is that something, or whatever, Social Security, Medicare, whatever the options are, is that something you all help guide families through what's available to their loved ones?
Yes, that is definitely something that we can do. So DDA in particular is sort of an area of expertise for us. We do not tend to help people apply for Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare benefits. There are a lot of other legal services organizations and community organizations in Virginia, Maryland, and DC that offer that kind of support. So we would help families get connected with them if that was the kind of support they needed. But yeah, learning more about the services that are available in schools as adults, that is definitely something that we can help families with. And one additional sort of program I want to mention is our Family Ties of DC program, which is one of the really main ways that we can partner with and support families. We have trained parent mentors. It's a parent-to-parent support program. So we have trained over 40 hours of pretty intensive training is provided to the parent mentors. And then if a family contacts us and they need some support, they need some just basic information, they need help solving a problem, they're not sure where to go next. Depending on what the issue is and what the area of expertise needed is, our coordinator, Rhonda White, will connect one of our trained parent mentors with the family that's in need of support. And so that's something that's good for people to know they can reach out to us for. And there's actually a form on our website that people can fill out, which is helpful because it gives Rhonda a lot of the basic information that she needs. And then to get connected to a mentor parent.
Okay. And so how do you all charge for your services?
Most of our monitoring and advocacy services for DC residents are provided at no charge because we were founded specifically to support DC residents with developmental disabilities getting services from the Developmental Disabilities Administration. Some of the sort of life planning type services and supports that we offer, it would depend on the family's income and the level of need. If it was like a lengthy, many meetings, then that might be something where we charge an hourly fee.
Gotcha.
But it really depends on how significant of support someone needs, or if it's just a quick conversation where we connect someone to a resource, that wouldn't be something we would charge families for.
Okay, so I'll give you an example of a family, and you could tell me sort of kind of how you might your group might advise them. So we have a client, she's 89 years old. She has a 62-year-old son with developmental disabilities. Her apparent plan was to live forever. They live in the house
As it
together.
often is.
And so, and she now, they both need our services. And because she had a slip and fall, and maybe it's dawning on her that this was not a likely successful long-term plan. So how do you coach people? How do you, get them to see that living forever is not a likely scenario and start to think about planning?
This is, and this was really the focus of my work for my final years at the ARC, was trying to remind families that frankly, the healthcare for people with developmental disabilities is so much better than it used to be. And yes, some people have challenging medical conditions, but most folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, can live, their life expectancy is no different than the rest of the population. And most parents assume and hope that their children will outlive them. And so what I tell families when I can get to them sooner than the family you're mentioning, but there's no time like the present, is don't wait. You can't wait. Don't wait for a crisis. Don't wait for a situation where you're now in a nursing home and not able to provide any day-to-day support, or you are in the hospital because, like you said, you've fallen and broke a hip and you had to have surgery, and now you're at a rehab center for months. Don't wait. Start thinking about what life looks like when you're no longer providing the day-to-day support now. And it's not a think about it once, have a 1-hour conversation with, your loved one, or with, an advocate, or with a lawyer, and you're done. It's an ongoing, lifelong conversation that families need to have about their loved one supports. Number one, because your needs and your family member with the disabilities needs are going to constantly change as they get older, as they find a new interest, as they make different connections, as they learn about new things they want to do and try out, as their routines change, as their medications change. All of that changes whatever plan you made before. And so, yes, make a plan, but then come back to it as often as you can. I mean, obviously, once a year is sort of ideal, but it's important to think about your housing situation. Where do you want your loved one to live? If you want them to live in your house, how is that possible if you're not there? What kinds of supports will they need? How can you get that in place and get that set up and ready to go? What happens to the actual ownership of the home? If your home isn't the ideal place because of accessibility, or whatever natural supports are maybe not there and somewhere better, is it better for that transition to a new home to happen while you're still in reasonable health and able to really support the transition and make it easier for your loved one? And what does that look like, and how will it be paid for? Do they want roommates or not? Families also need to think about sort of how their loved one will pay for things when they're not there to sort of manage all of that. Do they need to apply for public benefits if they're not already on them? Do you have funds that need to be put in a special needs trust or an ABLE account? And the other thing is to really think about their daily routines and how you maintain those. Are they written down? Do people know them? How will you ensure some sort of consistency? Losing you or losing your day-to-day support will be a huge, huge change for your family member with a disability. How do you ensure as much other things can continue? And frankly, it requires writing stuff down, sharing it with people, and having what sometimes are unpleasant, uncomfortable, and conversations we don't want to have out loud with whoever your other family members are that are going to step in, or if there are community supporters, if there are neighbors that are going to watch out for your loved one, if there are, people in your faith community or close family friends, whoever it is that's going to step in your place. Or if it's not, you don't have that support network, starting to think about putting one together, or making sure you apply for government services so that paid supports can be in place when you're not able to do it anymore.
So if you had, let's say, one critical word of advice for families with a young adult that is ultimately not going to be able to live independently, is there one thing that you would share with people?
One thing.
Well, it can be more than one, but I just looking for the thing that you do that you see happen week after week after week. People are showing up and it's the same sort of pattern. And if you could stop that pattern, what would it be, sort of thing?
Well, I mean, I think the things that people contact us about are, tend to be challenges they're having getting the services their loved one needs. A doctor has said they need a piece of equipment and they can't get it, or that they need an in-home aid like what your agency provides, and they're not happy with the one they have, or the person is showing up late, or they're just not a good fit. They're not making a good connection. And so it's just not a good working relationship. And so we deal with a lot of those issues, making sure that medical needs are being met, making sure that day-to-day support needs are being met. From our legal team's perspective, a lot of what we get really is around self-determination and dignity and respect issues, and helping family members and people with disabilities figure out how to best support the person to make their own decisions with whatever supports they need throughout their lifetime. And frankly, this applies to aging adults as well. Challenges with our cognitive thinking often come with aging, and thinking about that when you're younger and getting proper paperwork and relationships in place so that your wishes and preferences are heard and respected, is something that happens throughout people with disabilities, particularly people with intellectual and developmental disabilities lifetimes, starting right at 18, when schools and doctors tell families, oh, you got to go get guardianship. Well, do you really? Like, what's the individual situation? That might be true in certain circumstances, but it's probably not true in most circumstances. So a lot of what our legal team deals with is that. And so I guess advice is to really, to the extent that your loved one with a disability is capable of expressing their wishes and interests to
Right.
you, really listen to them, include them, make sure they understand what their service and support needs are so they can tell you what they need and can tell you when what they're getting isn't working for them.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you have an example, let's say, of, something that you're really proud of on behalf of your team that they accomplished for a family? Just an example of a nice win, something that, someone came to you with a particular issue, challenge, or whatever, and you were really able to help them successfully guide to a positive result.
Yeah, there are a couple that come to mind that recently happened. One was with our legal team on this issue of supported decision making, and it actually happened as a result of one of our trainings. A mother had attended one of our trainings around alternatives to guardianship, and she reached out to say, hey, my 18-year-old daughter with an intellectual disability is about to go off to a college program in another state that we found for her, that's going to meet her needs, and it's terrifying. And she wants to make her own decisions. We want her to be independent and make her own decisions, but she's going to be out of state, and she does sometimes struggle with certain things. And what can we do? And so our staff attorneys met with the young woman And, you know, we're able over the course of several meetings and lots of conversations to figure out that she did really want to make her own decisions, but she knew I really need my mom and dad. And she had very clear ideas on the kinds of support she wanted from mom and the kinds of support she wanted from dad. And so we were able to help her execute supported decision-making agreements, two different ones, one for mom and one for dad, that very clearly said, I want mom's help on these things and in these ways, and I want my dad's help on these things and in these ways. And our attorney also helped the woman sign a healthcare power of attorney, so that she could identify her dad as the person she wanted to make medical decisions for her if a doctor ever said that she didn't have the capacity to make them herself. And she sort of said to us when it was all done, you know, I feel so much better now. I can go to college knowing I'm going to be okay if something happens. And so that was one of
Right.
those things where it made us like feel really good about getting sort of everybody's ducks in a row. And of course, you know, we can't stop emergencies from happening, but both the family and the young lady felt like they'd been sort of set up for the best success they could have. And the other one is actually, we have a bilingual advocacy specialist who works with Latino families. And we were contacted by a mother. I believe the family was from Mexico originally. And she was concerned because they'd applied to the DC Developmental Disabilities Administration for support because he has an intellectual disability and he was 24 and he was at home not getting any support and he was denied services. And so our advocacy specialist was able to sort of work with the family to not necessarily reapply, but reconsider the application they'd submitted and provide, you know, gather some additional records and documents. And the young man had been in a special education charter school, so it was very clear that he had an intellectual disability and needed some pretty significant day-to-day supports, and was able to get the young man set up with, you know, day and I think it was mostly day services, if I'm recalling, because the family was able to provide supports at home for residential purposes. But beyond sort of that, that's the kind of advocacy we kind of do
Okay.
for everyone. And it's really nice to have a bilingual advocate who can help Latino families. But the thing that I was most proud of with that story was the advocacy specialist was able to make sure that the family got connected with a bilingual service coordinator in the government agency so that the kind of language barriers that had caused the denial in the first place could be avoided in the future. And
Gotcha.
this family would be much more successful in navigating the system.
Okay, I got one other question and then we'll open it up if anyone has. So, you know, we hear a lot from families that they cannot get services, more in Montgomery County, because that's where we are, where they've gone through the DDA process, they have a provider who's been assigned, provider has no people, or they can't find enough direct support workers or counselors or advisors. Any thoughts or suggestions to help folks like that I could share when they call me?
Frankly, that is like that is happening everywhere across
Right.
the country. It's not just in the district in Maryland. COVID, I think, really highlighted the problem, but it did actually start even before COVID. It is really hard work to be a direct support professional. It's a lot of physical hands-on work. If it's, you know, folks with significant medical challenges, there's a lot of, you know, very intimate, sometimes scary things you have to do to support someone. If it's a person that has some, you know, co-occurring mental health or behavioral challenges, there can be, you know, de-escalating physical incidents. And so it's and it's not frankly great pay, and it doesn't come with
Right.
a lot of you know, health insurance and
Right.
vacation days. And
Yep. Okay.
it's really hard to recruit people. And you know, most states do allow family members to provide direct support and be paid for it. So if you have, cousins or folks in your family that are interested in supporting your loved one or someone else because of their connection to your family member, encourage them. I would say it's not a terrible, it can be a really rewarding sort of job for young people who are,
Okay.
undecided about their career path, or trying to make some money to put themselves through college or sort of find their place in the world. It's hard to make it sort of a lifelong career, but it is, unfortunately, I wish I had an answer to that one,
Okay.
frankly, Steve, but I don't have the silver bullet for that
Uh,
one. It is a
I thought
problem.
you did. I thought so. No,
And
one last question. Yeah.
if I did, people would really, I'd be in high demand all over the country. It is really all providers, all states, all across the country. It is a really, really big challenge. And it is, frankly, what stinks about it is it's putting a lot more pressure on families to have
Yep.
to do a lot more
Yep.
themselves.
One last
And
question I have for you. Let me interrupt
I
you.
would
So
just,
I always try to be close to time. Go ahead. You
yeah,
have one.
well, I was just going to say, Steve, I really encourage families to get themselves support, come to you and organizations like yours that offer respite, so that they make sure they're taking care of themselves, because so much more is being put on their shoulders.
All right. And so one last question. Do you all have like a handbook or something that says, if I don't even know where to get started, that you could send to families that says, here's the checklist of things you just need to start thinking about? Is that something that you all have?
Um, I don't know the answer to that question.
All right.
Can I circle back with my outreach team, and you guys
Absolutely.
can send it out to your folks after the fact? I don't think that we do. I think our
Okay.
answer is call us and we'll walk you through it, because
Gotcha.
it's so
Okay.
different depending on your individual
Yeah.
situation. But I'll circle back with you on that one.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Well, look, I want to thank you, Shawn, for attending today. This has been hugely helpful, great information. Quality Trust, obviously, a very much needed and impactful organization. So thanks for all you and your team do. And so that's this month's version of What's Your Plan. If anybody has any questions, feel free. Shawn's contact information was up at one point. I don't know if it was up now, but if not, let Patricia know and she can put you in touch, or you can look up, I assume Quality Trust has a website that is very expansive because I was on it, and you can find out more information that way. So again, Shawn, thanks very much.
Thank you again for having us. Yeah, dcqualitytrust.org.
Excellent. Thank you.